make another bucket hat, like this one. When I searched for patterns how to make bucket hats, I realized that most tutorials or patterns are for crochet hats, and I really wanted to knit one because I like this more even texture for a wintry bucket hat version a lot more. So if you're interested how you can knit this kind of bucket hat, then stay tuned and I'll show you how. But first, we need yarn. Okay, for this project you can basically choose any kind of yarn that you have in your stash. You can even combine different kind of yarns, which I also did and will do now. For my brown bucket hat, I knitted that with 2 strands of Sundays Garden alpaca. It's a DK weight yarn, and I combined this 2 strands of alpaca with 2 strands of brushed alpaca silk from Drops. And I knitted that up with 6mm needles, which gives this fabric a very thick and dense structure. So for this bucket hat that we will make together, I will also use Sundays Garden alpaca, this DK weight yarn, because I have a little bit left from a beanie that I made. And I will combine this with 1 strand of Drops Melody and also 1 strand of Drops brushed alpaca silk. The colors go really well together, and this is all leftover yarn that I will be happy to use up. And I again want to have a very fluffy and thick texture. And I think I will knit this yarn combination with a 7mm needle, so I will go up a needle size compared to my brown bucket hat. So I have to try and figure out if I like how that looks, which means now we have to knit a swatch, and we also need that to figure out our gauge and measure how many stitches we will need to cast on. And if you're like me and also hate knitting swatches, I feel you, but don't skip this step. So this is my finished swatch, and I like how it turned out. I didn't block it because I will also not block my finished hat. I will just wear it as it is. If you know that you will maybe steam block your hat later, I would also recommend that you steam your swatch, but I won't do that. Now we have to measure our gauge to figure out how many stitches we need to cast on. And for that I will use a ruler. I always prefer to use a ruler for measuring my swatches instead of a tape measure. And I will just place my ruler onto my first row of stitches and measure how many I need on 10 centimeters. As you can see, my swatch is a little bit smaller than 10 centimeters, but that's no problem. I will just calculate my finished gauge or my total gauge. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 stitches on 9 centimeters. And if I divide my 12 stitches by the 9 centimeters and take that or multiply that by 10, then I have about 13.3 stitches on 10 centimeters. Now we need our head circumference. And for that I will have a measuring tape, and I will just measure, I have to take out my hair clip, measure the circumference of my head in about this angle. Do you see that? The back of my head, where my bucket hat will sit in the end, and bring it to the front. And this is my needed circumference, so I'm about at 54 centimeters. So I had a gauge of 13.3 3 stitches on 10 centimeters earlier in my swatch. So for 54 centimeters I need 13.3 divided by 10, and I will take that by 54. So that means I will need about 72 stitches. Our total stitch count needs to be divisible by 6 because we will increase and decrease for the brim and the top of the hat at 6 different points. So you want to have a number that is divisible by 6. Can I divide 72 by 6? Oh yes, I can. So perfect. That means my magic number will be 12. If your calculated total stitch count cannot be divided by 6 immediately, that's no problem. Just round up your number or round it down so that you reach a total stitch count that can be divided by 6. So now we have everything that we need to finally start our actual bucket hat. And that means you will now cast on your calculated total stitch number, eventually round it up or round it down so that it's divisible by 6, and cast on these stitches on your needles. I will use a round needle. I have a 50 centimeter round needle, and yeah, cast that on, knit in a round and knit about how high you want your bucket hat to be. For me that is about 10 centimeters, but I will show you that later. I don't like frogging brushed or mohair kind of yarn. Now that our middle part of our hat has the height that we want, for me it's the 10 centimeters in total, we will start decreasing, and we will decrease quite heavily because we want to make the top of the hat as flat as possible. So for our decreases, we will divide our total stitch count by 6, as I said earlier. With my 72 stitches, this means I have 12 stitches for each section that I will decrease in. That translates to knitting 10 stitches in normal stockinette, and for the 11th and 12th stitch of my section I will knit 2 together. Okay, now we're decreasing for the top. So I'll knit 10 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and the 11th and the 12th stitch I'll knit 2 together, so I have decreased 1. Knit 2 together. So these are my total initial 12 stitches as a decreased section, and this I will repeat 6 times, so I'm at the beginning of my round again. We will repeat our decreases in every round, which means that with each round that we knit, the number of stitches in between our decreases will be 1 stitch less than in the round before. Meaning that in this next round I'll now knit 9 stitches, and then my 10th and 11th stitch I will knit 2 together. And repeat that again in the whole round, and so on and so forth. And we will repeat that until we only have 6 stitches left in the end. I just wanted to change to double pointed needles, and then I realized that I don't have 7mm double pointed needles, so magic loop it is. Okay, for my last row I transferred my stitches to double pointed needles, and I said earlier that I don't have 7mm double pointed needles, so I just picked up the next smaller ones that I had available. These are 6.5mm. It's fine just for the last round. Just because I find it much more easier to do this last round with double pointed needles than with magic loop. So the last round will be knit 2 together in the round. And now to finish off the top, I cut my yarn, threaded to a wool needle, and now I'll thread the yarn through each one of the 6 stitches that I've left. And I'll do that 2 times, that's why I don't let the stitches go off the needle yet. So now I've threaded through every stitch once, and I'll do that twice. So it's these 2 again. And I pull the yarn tight, and for now just thread it through so that the yarn is on the other side, the inside. Okay, so now we can try on the current state of our hat and look if it fits. Still looks a bit funky because we're still missing the brim, but the fit is good. That's exactly where I want the hat to sit before adding the brim. Now, as a last step, we will add the folded brim. For that, we will pick up every stitch. So we have the same amount of stitches that we had in the beginning that cast on. For me, this will be my 72 stitches again. Now that we have picked up our stitches around our cast on edge, we will start increasing for the brim. But how often you will increase or how often you will have an increase rounds depends on how flared you want the brim to be. For my brown hat, I increased every 3rd row to have a only very slightly flat brim. That's how I like the look of my hat. And as my gauge now with this white version is very similar to my brown version, I will also increase in every 3rd row. But if you maybe have a much larger gauge and use larger needles, or maybe you want to have your brim to be a little bit more flared, maybe consider increasing every 2nd round, but I think every 3rd round is what I will go for now. I will work my increases again in 6 different places around my hat, which means I will now again divide my 72 stitches by 6. This means again an increase section, or the section in between increases is always 12 stitches for me. For me that translates into knitting 11 stitches stockinette, and in my 12th stitch I will increase, and I will increase by knitting 2 stitches in 1. So I will knit 1 right stitch through the front loop or leg of my stitch, and then 1 right stitch again through the back loop or leg of my stitch. And this again I will repeat 6 times until I'm again at the beginning of my round. And this is our increase row, or how we will knit our increase round. I finished my increase round, and now I'll knit 2 rounds a simple stockinette, and then I will increase again in the same manner, only that now my increase section, instead of 12 stitches, it has 13 stitches, which means I will knit 12 stitches stockinette, and then my 13th stitch I will again increase in the same way as before. Repeat that 6 times for the full increase round. Then I will knit again 2 rounds, and then I will knit my 3rd increase round. I want to increase in total, I think, 3 times, but that depends on how wide you want your brim to be. Okay, I'm done with increasing my brim. After my last increase round, I again knitted 2 rounds simple stockinette without increasing, and now my brim is about 5 centimeters wide. Now I will purl 1 round so that my folded brim folds in nicely, and I will then again start to decrease my brim, and I will do that in the same manner that I increased for my brim, just the other way around. So to calculate how many stitches I have to knit in between my decreases, I will again take my total stitch count that I have on my needles right now, which are 90 stitches, and divide those by 6, which are for me 15 stitches. So my decrease section now will have 15 stitches, which means in my decrease rounds I will knit 13 stitches stockinette, right stitches, and then my 14th and 15th stitch I will knit 2 together. So that's my decrease round. And in the following decrease rounds you will again always knit 1 stitch less in between your decreases than you did in the previous decrease rounds. So that means that I will now finish up my hat with the inward folding part of my brim by decreasing in a mirrored way that I increased, meaning I will now, after my purl round, knit 2 non-decrease rounds, knit 1 decrease round, and repeat that 3 times. So in the end I will again have 72 needles, so my starting stitch count on my needle, and then I can bind off. So it's the next day. I ran out of daylight yesterday, but I actually managed to finish this bucket hat in just 1 day. So yeah, that's the finished hat. And so this is the final try on. And I love how it turned out. It's just slightly more fluffy than my brown version. If I actually, if you from down below, do you see that I do kind of look like a mushroom, like the white part of a mushroom, but this double folded thick part is really the part of the brim that will keep your ears warm, so I really like it for winter. And to be honest, I ran out of 2 yarns yesterday, both of my Sandnes Garn DK alpaca yarn, and I also ran out of Drops Melody, but you can't even tell if I don't. Even if I show it to you, you can't even tell. So I ran out of Sandnes Garn alpaca right about here. So after my 2 non-decrease rounds, and then I just continued with 1 strand of Melody and 1 strand of brushed alpaca silk, and then that lasted me until the end of the brim. Then I ran out of Drops Melody, and my very last row, so the cast off row, I only knitted with 2 strands of brushed alpaca silk, but you can't even tell. So I guess as long as you make it to the inside part of your brim, it doesn't really matter if you have enough yarn. So it makes me really happy that I managed to use up my 2 yarns completely. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you're interested in what I knitted last year, maybe check out my last video where I talk about that. Bye!